All is not sweet with the bee industry. Industry heads met with Gisborne beekeepers this week to discuss challenging issues of bee health, decline in honey prices, pollination as a service option, bee diseases, and much needed funding for research. Bee health is always an important issue for the industry. And at the moment, Varroa is a big issue for beekeepers nationwide, Apiculture New Zealand Chief Executive Karin Kos says. Varroa is an external parasite that attacks and feeds on honeybees, spreading a disease called Varroosis. Latest survey results on the Varroa mite show Gisborne suffers one of the country's highest bee colony losses from Varroa. The New Zealand Colony Loss Survey has been conducted annually by Manaaki Whenua since 2015 and is funded by the Ministry for Primary Industries. The 2021 survey found the Mid-North Island region, including Gisborne, Waikato, Bay of Plenty, and Hawke's Bay, recorded the country's highest loss, with 8.6% of all colonies lost to the disease. In previous surveys, colony losses were most often attributed to queen problems in hives. But last year marked a change as the parasite was found to be responsible for nearly 40% of all losses. Mrs. Kos said the industry scientists and researchers were working round the clock to get a better understanding of what was driving the increase of mites.
So we don't have all the answers yet, but we certainly know that beekeepers are having to do a lot more to stay on top of Varroa.
It's just getting worse and worse, Wildkeep Honey owner Bill Savage said. His company has more than 5,000 hives over 110 sites spread all over the East Coast. Like many beekeepers, he has lost beehives to Varroa over the years. He said the treatments for mites were also getting difficult. Up until 4 or 5 years ago, 2 treatments were deemed sufficient. But now we have come to the stage where we are giving 3 or 4 treatments to get rid of the mites. Recommended treatment methods usually treat beehives with Baverol and oxalic acid. Mr. Savage said the Varroa mites were building up resistance to the treatments. Now that, I think, is the biggest challenge ahead in the industry, as more treatments incur more cost, he said. Mrs. Kos said another big issue for the industry was the imbalance in supply and demand in the honey market.
Demand for honey, particularly Manuka honey, has increased around the world because obviously it's a natural, healthy product and people want to take Manuka honey. So we've actually seen some good growth in exports for the last couple of years, although they are starting to decline, starting to fall off slightly. And so you're seeing the sorts of things that affect our industry are the sorts of things that affect all the primary sectors. The cost of freight. Trying to get freight, trying to move honey, it's really expensive.
In 2008, the country had a total of 343,000 hives producing honey. In 2019, the number of hives tripled to almost 1 million, causing an imbalance in the demand and supply for honey production.
When you get to somewhere like China, for example, where they're having these significant lockdowns, it's the inability of the consumer to be able to buy the product. So, look, we still think there's strong demand for New Zealand honey, particularly Manuka honey, but just any good quality New Zealand honey. But at the moment, it's very difficult because of that international supply chain, some of the constraints around that.
Industry figures valued New Zealand's pure honey export for 2021 at 462 million, down from 505 million in 2020. However, the $7.5 billion industry doesn't just value in its honey and bee products. It also includes the provision of pollination services. Bees play a critical pollination role in the agricultural and horticultural sectors, which need help in the production of fruits such as gold kiwi fruit and apples. Mr. Savage said since most beekeepers like him were unable to sell the excess honey, industry heads were considering the alternative of providing pollination services for food production. The kiwi fruit industry needs a huge number of bees to pollinate the fruit. New Zealand has approximately 8,000 hectares in kiwi fruit, and for production they need about 10 hives per hectare. Roughly, it means the industry would need around 80,000 hives of bee pollinating the kiwi fruits. At present, the beekeeper was paid around $230 for setting up and managing the hive for pollination. In the future, we could definitely see Gisborne beekeepers using pollination while keeping honey in the sidelines to fix the demand and supply issue for honey. Mr. Savage said carrying out pollination services would also cut down additional costs such as transportation. The cost of getting hives to places such as Varroa was about $600 for 40 hives per truck. For 3,500 hives he uses to produce honey, it would cost more than $50,000. But if you just keep them local, you can basically put them into pollination and have them somewhere very close to town and have reduced cost of operation, he said. AFB National Operations Manager Marco Gonzalez said he was excited to work with local beekeepers towards eradicating the bee disease.
It only affects young larvae. The bee larvae must be 1, 2, or 3 days old. If it is older than 3 days old, it's immune to the bacteria. Okay, but if the larvae that is that young, first day of life, second or third, consumes spores of these bacteria, the bacteria will hatch inside their gut and they will reproduce and eat all their body tissues, and it will turn it into a gluey mess.
An AFB outbreak in Varroa was detected about 2 years ago and was brought under control. Mr. Gonzalez said, although AFB hotspots were also detected in Tiki, Gisborne beekeepers were doing a good job to ensure low incidences of the disease.
So if every beekeeper reports quickly, then we will be more successful in eradicating the disease from the district. Yeah, but unfortunately, we face the challenge that a lot of beekeepers believe that if they report disease, the agency will look at them as bad beekeepers. But that's not the case. In reality, it's a requirement to report. And if you report, you're actually a good beekeeper.
Mrs. Kos says that while there are current headwinds, the New Zealand honey and bee industry does have a strong growth potential, especially Gisborne, which has a suitable warm climate and environment for both honey production and pollination.
There's some excellent honeys that are produced here, so I think it's a very positive future. It's a very positive future for New Zealand, but we've got a bit of work to do to get there.